Hello, everyone. It's Monska from Store. So, welcome to the next Backupmonster show. Today, we have a special guest, Thomas Demoor from the Impossible Cloud, and we'll talk about the future and deep dive of the object storage. So, hello, Thomas. It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's my pleasure to be here. Looking forward to our
Beautiful.
conversation.
Great, great. You asked me before we go into the stage where is the guitar. So, new year, new set it up. So we have all bunch of the great pictures with the Backupmonster related here. It's ET, of course. So we decided to share what our graphic, so Ada, did the last year and how creative she is. So kudos for her. So we would like to also share this couple of pictures in the next few episodes. But Thomas, coming back to you, could you share with us a little bit about yourself and your role in Impossible Cloud?
Cool. First of all, I'm old enough to know ET, so that's already gives away something, right? Some of the viewers might be fortunate enough to be young enough to have lived not have lived yet then.
Yeah, and you use the Winamp, I guess. So if you are old enough, you're supposed to use Winamp. Yeah.
Cool, fantastic. Yeah, I brought my living room, not my guitar.
Great. So, a few words about yourself, Thomas.
Cool. Yes, Thomas Demoor. I live in Belgium, so in Europe, just like you. I'm an object storage guy. So I did a PhD in computer science, queuing theory, the mathematics of waiting in line, but then decided that academia was nothing for me and startup life seemed like interesting. Joined a Belgian startup, Amplidata, who's working on S3 compatible private clouds. Spent 10 years working on ActiveScale, which eventually the product became. So we got acquired by Western Digital, the hard disk vendor. Spent quite a bit of time there, grew the team, California, teams in India. So that was a really great time. And then Western Digital exited the systems business, and they sold all the different service companies they had, the systems companies they had, and we ended up with Quantum, which was a tape library company. And so we had our S3 object store which was hard disk based, adding NVMe then as a layer. But then when joining Quantum, of course, there's a lot of cold storage systems also in public clouds. If you think about Glacier, Azure Cold, Baidu, Tencent, they all have cold tiers. And so Quantum wanted to replicate that for the next tier of customers, for MSPs. And they decided to acquire ActiveScale from Western Digital. And then we basically added a Glacier tier to the system. I think at Storeware you integrate with Glacier as well. Yes. And so we added that tier to the S3 object store. And of course, eventually that data would then end up on tape. So spent 10 years architecting these systems, 20 object storage patents, but these were all private cloud systems. Mm-hmm. So means that I think the public references that I can mention, there's like, for instance, in the United Kingdom, the genome of every citizen, it's stored in 3 data centers across London. It's about 150 petabytes. The last time that I think Quantum publicly spoke about that. And so that's not connected to the public internet. It's hard to service. Same major airports in Asia. You have to physically go there to basically service the system. And so I really wanted in my career to work on a public cloud. And that's why I just, in 2024 in summer, met Impossible Cloud, super ambitious. We're going to build a European cloud, startup again. After I started at the startup, and then American acquirers, had a great time there, learned a lot about scaling companies, scaling teams, working across geos. But of course, do I have a second startup in me was always a question that I asked, and it was definitely 10 years from now it would be too taxing. So it was now or never. And so I met the founders, super strong repeat founders with a track record and a very bold vision of building a European cloud.
Great, great. So this is a great story. So after the 10 years of the journey, you came back again into the startup mindset, growing mindset. But I would like to ask you more about the Impossible Cloud itself. You said that you met the founders, you speak with them, and you've been thrilled by the mission and the vision. So what actually makes this cloud impossible or extraordinary when we comparing to the others? Because I always have still the same questions. Compare Stower to Veeam, compare Stower to Acronis, Commvault, and the others. So what's your statement here and key differentiator against the even the big five or the other public clouds here?
Cool. I think Impossible Cloud is a public cloud, but it has a lot of the benefits of private clouds. And so because we use a distributed network of smaller data centers, the hyperscalers, they have very large, massive data centers. And so we instead leverage a community of third-party data centers. And so data gets stored close to you, but still in a secure manner. So it's encrypted, there's identity and access controls with IAM, and so you get all the security that you get from the public cloud, but the data is close to you, so that has latency and other performance benefits in the longer run. Also, we store the data with adequate data residency controls. So we're a European company, so it's a European entity, German entity. And so European regulations, super important. I think we all know GDPR. In my days in building private clouds at Quantum Western Digital, we were quite successful with private clouds, even smaller setups in European countries, Germany, the Nordics, France. There still is a strong sentiment of I want to own my data. I'm not going to put my data in a cloud across the Atlantic. And I think recently that's only been reinforced. I think it's always nice when you schedule things like this podcast, and then I think in the last 2 weeks, so many things happened that are super relevant. So, for instance, in America, Trump started on his first day. He signed all these new things. One of the things that he did was one of the treaties between Europe and the US around data privacy, and that European data can move to the US. I think he is working on changing that a little bit. And so the European Union has this data residency. I think, I don't think it's important to give you the details of the 5-letter words that the treaty stands for. Nobody will remember that. But it's really about GDPR, the US Cloud Act, how they interact, and can European companies safely store their data in Europe. So I think that's the second strong point, the European entity data residency. And the third one is, I think, it's a public cloud. It has a lot of benefits of private clouds, but it's still a public cloud. So that means that we take care of a lot of the hassle. You don't have to operate multiple data centers, operate hardware in multiple data centers, have an operations team, carry those OpEx costs. Those are all carried by us. And indeed, just like you mentioned Storeware versus Veeam versus Acronis, there's a lot of technical differentiation, but I think there it's the same on our side. But I think for the average user, that doesn't really matter too much. It's about what value can you deliver to users. what's the resulting value of those technical things. And so I think cost is a very big one, where because we're small, nimble, close to the user, there's no egress costs, and prices are up to 80% lower than with hyperscalers.
No, this is the important part, and I think to be a European startup and have built this legacy around our countries here in Europe, it's really important. I still, this is what you said. I see that we still struggling about the adapting more the services such as data in the cloud still in Europe. It's much more easier abroad in APAC or the Latin markets. So it's still so we need to wait a little bit more. But even from the backup perspective, we started to talk about it even when we built the first appliance in the previous companies. It was like 10 years plus before, and we talk about the storing the secondary data in the cloud, but it wasn't so successful as it's supposed to be. It's changing, it's evolving, so we see them that the mindset is changing, and the company sees that if the security is applied, if the easy of use is applied from the, let's say, backup vendor store, so usage as for the DR purposes or the secondary storage, it's so much easier to cope with and to implement it. We made this integration last year, and it's about a few minutes that the customers can start the secondary copy in a cloud. With this is what you said, without the hidden costs. You have a terabyte model. It's so simplified. You have really easy interface to grab the data in. Of course, if they not want to use the store in the end, because sometimes you would like to capture the data straight away from the bucket. So we need to educate and build the awareness that there are some players as we that they can cope with the biggest, and the customers can take the advantage not only from the pricing perspective but also from the technology and the closest to the key people. I still will what I noticed when we started the cooperation is the way how we can speak each other on a high level perspective or the management perspective, on the technology layer perspective, and we can make a decision and build something more disruptive than the others. And for all of the European countries and abroad or the other continents, we need to remember about it. But you said I'm object storage guy, and please explain me, because it's not typical that somebody say I'm the object storage guy. So you have a great story, you have a great experience, you talk about the patents. Can you tell what how this market is evolving, so we could a little bit come back into the history, how the object storage came into the reality, and what is the condition today from your personal perspective here, Thomas?
Cool. Yes, I'm a object storage guy, maybe not the object storage guy. There are probably others who would
Yeah,
want
the others. Okay.
contend for that title as well. But so I think it's been super interesting. And so to your point, what you said earlier, it's still early days. In Europe, yes, and I think that's rapidly changing. To your point, and also we have a broader vision than Europe alone. I think just like the US entities built out a worldwide cloud, we can do exactly the same thing from Europe, and we have stronger regulatory framework behind us. In terms of what is object storage, also there, so much has changed. Yeah? We already mentioned backup and archiving, recovery. Those are the traditional workloads that also today still are a very, very large share of both our customers as well as, I think, a lot of public cloud customers. But Amazon S3 is, it's from 2006, so that's a very long time, and it was not even the first object store. But I think we'll get there maybe in a moment in the history. Maybe I'll first explain what object storage is for me. And so I think S3 has gotten a lot of popularity. But for me, the S3 API, so S3 storage and object storage are two different things. Typically, object stores have an S3 API, but because of the success of this model, a lot of other products have also started adopting S3 APIs. And so what really changed the paradigm, if you think about when it got started, it's by scaling the system, by having a multi-node system, you can create for the end user something that's durable and available. And durable means that if something fails, that the system can handle that. The system automatically recovers from device failure. So let's say a hard disk or an NVMe device where the data gets stored. If that fails, automatically the system recovers from that and restores or recreates the data on another device. Same for nodes. If nodes go down or temporarily unavailable, the system can get the data from somewhere else. And so the entire topology of the system and which hardware is involved, and before you had active and passive, and an admin needed to flip it over. All those things got obscured behind the API. That's handled internally in the system, and as the end user, you just get these things basically as part of the total package. And I think the S3 API allows you to then over HTTP address that system with a nice API, which also has seen a ton of evolution. When I was at Quantum, our CTO was Brian Pawlowski, one of the co-authors of the NFS spec and the RFC for NFS in the 80s when I was still a young child. So we discussed about this a couple of times. So really, NFS, it's great, fantastic protocol for file, but the spec is the spec, and it's from in the 80s. As the S3 API keeps on evolving, and features get added. If you think about the beginning and now, there was no versioning. Things that you also use at Storeware: versioning, replication, encryption,
object lock, which is a great feature. Yeah.
Object lock, immutability. In the systems that came before, which were typically network attached storage, NAS, with things like the NFS protocol, there you had to, these things needed to be bolted on top. To get security, you needed a separate Kerberos system to integrate with. To do snapshots, to do replication, you only need these extra systems. And here, really, with S3 API, Amazon said this is the API, and all this magic happens behind the API, internally in the system, which means that we can keep on evolving and we can keep on adding value. And value has been added for over 20 years now. And so that's all about S3, and all the systems that speak S3 have these properties. They're resilient against device failures and node failures. What for me is the difference with the true object store is what the hyperscalers call availability zones, where you can survive the failure of a facility. If you can spread the data around so that you have the data spread across multiple facilities. If you lose a facility, the data one, is still available, you can read it back, and two, again, durability, eventually the data gets restored. So there is a way to recover the data, both for serving it to the user and for recreating the parts that got lost because there was a catastrophic failure. And people think, when will this happen? Data center, fire, earthquake.
Remember the OVH was burned, and there were the same backups in the same location because it was cheaper, or people didn't know or they didn't believe that something could happen. So this is a great example how the geo replication and geo, let's say, disperse the data between the data centers and not keep in the same location is crucial. So this is a part of the 3-2-1 rule. So you need at least two sites, and so from one side it's so easy, it's natural, that it should supposed to be like this, Uh, but thanks to actually the object storage and putting the one flag to do the additional availability zone, it's much more easier to cope with this kind of the scenarios.
Yeah, indeed. So the hyperscaler object stores, you can each zone has multiple each region has multiple availability zones, and you can then also replicate to other regions an asynchronous copy if you even want the data somewhere else. Indeed, for that reason, or to move a copy of the data closer to end users. But really, the core thing is about protecting. Even a single system has enough resilience, and so of course, these facilities need to be far away from each other. If they're next to each other, if it's in the next rack, the same fire is going to hit them. That's exactly to your point. And of course, that's a little bit at odds with fast storage. If you want AI sub-millisecond latencies, that becomes a little bit more challenging. So I think there's in my head still two types of storage: the sub-millisecond storage, which is single facility, and then object storage, which is multi-facility.
And I think about another wording, so the scalability, and do not think about what is the limitation in every file system. When you purchase the typical arrays, you need to think, okay, what are the limitations on my file system? If you have a S3 and the proper configuration of the object storage, you can think it's supposed to be unlimited. It's never like this, but it's much more easy to cope. And when you purchasing this kind of the services from the companies such as Impossible Cloud, it's their responsibility to cope with all of the redundancy, keep everything in a good place, performance, and the scalability. So it gets lots of different aspects that you need to carry about internally when where you work in an IT company or build the services related to the storage itself. But like you said, it's not always for all of the type of the workload. So we need to still keep in mind that the object storage is great, but not for all of the purposes. But I would like to ask you, because we many times switch from the, shall we go to the public? Shall we go to the private? Lately, there's more and more discussion about the hybrid. What came back to this, let's say, best use cases and usage of the object storage, how you typically encourage your DST partners on the end users to using the Impossible Cloud these days?
So indeed, I think public versus private. I mean, I've now seen both sides of the coin, right? And indeed, I think for some companies, public is the right tool for end user developers. Public, I think, is the no-brainer. For companies, I think a lot of them should benefit from a public cloud, because you share so much resources. If you just think about the backup and recovery use case, if you have 200 terabytes, I mean, that's 8 hard disks nowadays. How resilient of a system can you build with 8 hard disks? If you share with others, if you have a public cloud and you share, and this means that your data, your bucket, there's not like one hard disk with your bucket on it. Every bucket goes to all the hard disks. And so if you store your data, you get the performance of all the buckets. And so if you have 1,000 companies sharing the same system, typically not all 1,000 of them are going to recover at the same time. And so although you only have 8 hard disks worth of storage, 200 terabytes that you put into the shared cloud, when you get your data back, you can leverage the performance of all the devices in the system. And today I recover, and tomorrow you recover, and maybe 3 days from now, 5 people recover at the same time, but not all the 1,000 customers will recover at the same time. So for these kind of workloads, sharing is fantastic, and you just get so much performance gains, and performance here translates into recovery time. I think, Pavel, you're the expert. Of course, we try to help you and help your users accomplish this, but backup and recovery times are stressful times, and making it faster, I think, makes people be able to sleep and go to bed and sleep rather than stay up through the night.
Yeah, definitely. So right now, the object storage, you said we are still is as a beginning after even more than 10 years. So why now this is a perfect time for the object storage?
So if you think about, and I can be patriotic a little bit now. So I think the first object store was actually a Belgian company. It was a late 1990s FilePool. It was not called object storage yet. It was a content addressable storage. You put the file in, and then it gave you back the file name, which was the hash of the contents. And so that system had a one-to-one. Every piece of data had the same name, and so that got acquired by EMC. It turned then into the Centera product, and so because of this mapping of this is the data, this is the name, and there's a one-to-one link. If somebody modifies the data, also the name would change. That made it super relevant for compliance use cases. And so I think and EMC, it's a product that then stayed around for another 15 years, and it's probably still here and there. So it's running somewhere. So that was really, I think, one of the systems that Amazon and the other early object storage companies took inspiration from. It was a Belgian company, and so Amazon released in 2006. Amplidata was founded 2 years later, 2008. And so it's such a long time ago. And as I said earlier, there's so much innovation that has happened in the meanwhile, and it still keep on happening. I think Amazon started as for developers. There were people using their e-commerce website, and other people wanted to query Amazon e-commerce website, and they said, "Hey, these people need storage. We need storage too, because let's open up what we've built in house to the greater world." I think that backup and recovery, we've talked about it, probably came as a big second use case, and is one of the major use cases today still. When I was at Amplidata, one of the things that I contributed to a lot was actually the connection with Apache Hadoop. So Apache Hadoop, back in 2014, 15, it had the HDFS file system, and there was also this little option on the side to talk to S3, which was not popular then. And I think I said, okay, that's one of the projects I took on. Let's connect. We see this future of big data. Let's connect this Hadoop thing with S3. And so I spent probably a year and a half contributing to the S3A connector. And that thing eventually got used by all these other projects. It got used by Apache Spark, which is the open source project that then turned out Databricks as a company, which is now used around the world. And this entire, I think that's the next use case that came up, ETL. All these startups in the US building on top of Amazon. I'm a startup, I start my company, I just use this thing. How big am I going to become? Who knows? I have all this data, I have all these unstructured data, log files. Let's just put them in. And this thing scales. So if my company grows, this will grow with me. And I think that's your earlier question of hybrid cloud. If you think at super big companies, they grow in the public cloud, and then indeed when they go for IPO, OpEx becomes a thing, and then they need to reconsider, should we go for a hybrid strategy? There's been quite some things in the media about that in the last couple of years. I think the next use case are these fast file systems that came up. I think the thing I mentioned earlier, 150 petabyte of genome data. There's it's like researchers go, give me all the women in Bristol with breast cancer over 40, or give me all the men with colon cancer over 60, and then the data gets loaded from the backing object store into the fast storage. and then the performance goes. And we saw a lot of the same workloads, like in semiconductor, you manufacture, you have a production line, you have the previous runs with good yield, this same temperature, same humidity. Let's get that old run back, compare with the current run. Is it good, or should we stop the production line because there's a problem? And so this is processing data at many gigabytes per second per production line. I think 15 gigabytes per second per production line. These kind of use cases are bread and butter for object storage. And then more recently, and I think it started probably almost 10 years ago with Snowflake, people figured out that they could even build what people said before: don't run your database on S3. It's for large files. People figured out that they could split even databases and analytical systems into two parts, where they said, most of the data we'll put in S3, and we'll have a little caching layer in front. And so I think Snowflake is a prime example. I think they released even a paper about that in 2016, how they built on top, and that inspired a lot of other companies. And if you now think about Neon, for instance, which is Postgres SQL on top of S3, it's just a caching layer and then S3. If you think about WarpStream, it's Apache Kafka. They're not storing to a local SSD anymore. It's S3 as a storage layer. And you have vector databases, the log streaming system from Datadog, Husky. There's a ton of these use cases. There's a super interesting essay by the US venture VC, Davy Strabik, S3 as the universal data infrastructure backend. So all new projects are really building on top of S3, where before they would have built on top of a local device in their EC2 instance or maybe EBS. And so this is really, over the last couple of years, another new workload that S3 has received. And that's also what I meant before. It's not only adding features, it's also adding new use cases. S3, more and more use cases are moving over to S3. And then I think we come to probably the most recent one is now AI. AI is I think the biggest hype of the moment. And AI, it has many phases, and so training is different than inference, and you have sometimes you need low latency at the edge. You have different characteristics. So definitely there. I think it's still evolving a lot. I think it's too early to tell. Definitely with Possible Cloud at the edge, we have a very interesting proposition because we use a lot of smaller data centers rather than a few big ones. We have the data at the edge close to the end users. And so that opens up a lot of opportunities for some of the AI workloads, more around agents and inference probably. But even then, everybody said, you need massive data centers, super high-end GPUs. And if we would have had this podcast last week, probably that would have been the story. But then DeepSeek.
DeepSeek, this is what I wanted to ask. It's a huge hype, and and a huge gap, because the other continents not sleeping, and there will be a huge, let's say, switch in the next years. We'll see how it goes, but we cannot put everything on one player here.
No, I don't think one player will. I don't think there will be one player. And I also don't think there will be one use case. So I don't think all the use cases will be the same, and Possible Cloud will capture all of them. But I think DeepSeek, it was not H100s, it was H800s. I think it was more less intensive GPUs, more distributed. So I think these things are actively changing, and you can also see again. Amazon, the S3 API, because they keep on adding value, they keep on evolving. For instance, they added, I think 2 months ago, almost, they had their yearly reInvent show. And so they added AWS tables to work better with data. They, I think last year, added the S3 Express One Zone. which is, and we talked about high performance file systems. Well, that's exactly what I mean. Amazon added a high performance zone. I think it's based on, but they don't tell, so you can only guess. Probably NVMe. It's probably a file system because they use the ordered listing has been replaced by a random listing, which makes me think it's using a consistent hashing approach, which S3 obviously doesn't do because it gives you ordered listings. So even Amazon says, okay, this is a new high NVMe, fast NVMe thing, but it's one zone. We're putting it in one availability zone. We cannot do this across the network. And so Amazon, and I really have a ton of respect for the way they've built the system. And so they're really a technology first company where they say, okay, we're not gonna fool our users. All the other stuff is in multiple availability zones. This thing, there's no beating the speed of light, right? We cannot put something in a data center 3 milliseconds away and then say that it has sub-millisecond latency.
Thomas, you said thanks for this answer. So it's a great use cases that you mentioned here. You said about this collaboration and building this cloud ecosystem with the smaller data centers, and I would like to get a little bit deep dive here because it's actually related to your business models and how this. What is the main motivation on, let's say, diverse the data between the smaller data centers, and what are the key advantage against the, let's say, other proposition for the biggest vendors? Because the biggest vendor, building the hub, the huge data center, Poland, Germany, etc., and they saying we'll put all of the data here in this location. You're saying you have other strategy because you're saying the more distributed model and building this cloud ecosystem. So how could you a little bit more tell us about this approach?
Yeah. So I just said before that I have a ton of respect for Amazon and the way they technically evolve the system. On the business side, I think the state of the cloud is that there's a handful of companies which indeed have these massive data centers. It's an oligopoly. I think that's not good for the world, right? And things that are not good for the world, typically, they don't last forever. And so in technology, they have these waves. It's all about centralization, decentralization. And so we've spent 20 years centralizing now. And I think that in the next wave, that's our vision, is that the future is decentralized and for a lot of use cases is going to be better. So the oligopoly increases the cost for the end user. If you look at Amazon, their revenue, their margins, they are quite higher than the average business. So there's great businesses, hats off to them. But I think there's a room there for disruption. So definitely offering something at lower costs, and that's what we do. We are 80% of the cost of hyperscalers like them. The second thing is indeed data placement, and I'm not saying that all the data will move to the edge. Again, for instance, in AI, for some of the use cases, a lot of the data might need to be close to each other in these massive data centers. But today we're doing that for everything. And I think the edge will be better for a lot of use cases. For a lot of your customers at Storeware, for a lot of the use cases I mentioned before, I think it's better to have it close to them than to have it in a massive data center. It depends what you do with the data. Because close by is low latency, better network, and then also these massive data centers, electricity is not central. Electricity is decentral. And so, for instance, in West London, there's like the authority is saying like, okay, dear housing companies, no more projects for the next 10 years because the data centers have taken up all of the electricity. We're going to stop housing. So I'm not sure that this will keep on lasting. So definitely for some use cases, central data centers are great. But I think if we move to a decentral world, closer to the user, with distributed energy production, a lot of data will benefit from that. And of course, if you can do that then in a cloud which is a European entity, also the data residency, placing the data in your country or in the EU, that's also super important for us, that we are very transparent about, even though it's third parties, we are very transparent about where the data is, because in the end, that's what end users want. That's what I said earlier. The reason that a lot of European companies are not using American public clouds yet is because they want this control. And so we can offer them this control, but yet can still take away all of the hassle of managing your own data centers, because you need to manage multiple data centers to get to the resilience that the hyperscalers offer. And when we were at Quantum and Western Digital, I spoke to so many customers that said, "Yeah, this all is great, but I don't have 3 data centers. I just have 1 or maybe 2, because before I had active passive. So do I really need to have a 3rd data center? Do I need to acquire a 3rd data center simply to do this?" For a lot of customers are too small to do that, and then public clouds like Impossible Cloud are a fantastic fit for them.
So thanks for that. So I'm also interested, and one of our last questions is, we many times asking our guests about, we moved, how did the object storage evolved? But I'm curious about the future. We already mentioned AI, so of course it will be the significant part and piece of the object storage in the future. But could you share also the other trends that maybe we don't see today, but you consider it and as let's say the next phase of the evolution of the object storage? It's also related to the future of the Impossible Cloud. So if you could share with us the insight. My series said that they don't understand what I'm saying about. So, but maybe you did.
Yeah, Siri cannot yet predict the future of object storage, but I can. So let's try. I think first of all, it's what we were just talking about. It's about decentralization, and so Impossible Cloud, we leverage a network of third-party data centers, and so it's a collaborative model. I think if you think about the hyperscalers, they're super big. They have 100,000 employees working in their cloud division. Still, there's more smart people outside of the hyperscalers than within. And so there's more data centers outside of, together, if you count up all the colocation data centers, all the smaller data centers, there's more footprint there than there is in these massive hubs. And so by leveraging those 2 communities, by having all the data centers contribute their dual power, dual network, rack space connected to great network interconnects, have the correct hardware there, and then on top of that, you can offer this community of hardware providers offers this to a community of builders on top. Now we are building S3 and IAM services, but other people can come and join the network and build other services on top. If they want to build a GPU project, if they want to build a Kafka message bus as a service system. So that's how we see again, as I said, the decentralization wave. Together, we can achieve more, and so we have these 2 communities that we're building. And it's not only in technology that this is happening. I already spoke about energy. I think what we're doing for cloud, it's basically called DeepIn. It's decentralized physical infrastructure. There are projects doing this for energy. There are projects doing this for Wi-Fi, for networking, for the telecom industry. But if you think about reshoring, if you think about AI, if you think about the media business, it used to be centralized, a couple of newspapers. Now it's all about content creators, if you think about finance, the fintech movement, the world has these waves, and so we are now, I think, after 15 years of centralization, we're now heading into decentralization, and we are basically a decentralized cloud. I think that's the shortest statement that you can describe us with. And then more specifically about object storage, I think we'll keep on using all the devices underneath. There's been a lot of noise the last couple of years about hard disk is dead and NVMe will replace it by 20, and then the number every year, the number shifts a year. So I don't think NVMe will replace hard disk anytime soon. So if you're buying
with the killing the typical disk, it will be like killing the tapes. Believe me, it will last forever.
Yeah.
So I don't also believe that it will happen. It can change the number of the percentage of usage, but like like you said about the quantum and the tapes, nobody said about it, but the hyperscalers are the biggest customers for the tapes. So if you think that the tape is dead, no, still most of the data in the cold storage stays on the tapes here today.
Yeah, indeed. At Quantum we had great fun and built a system like that. So it's indeed tape is even growing. So and there's even, I think if you think about tape, it's so old. It's really about cold storage. So there's projects around ceramic glass. There's projects around DNA storage for really this cold tier. I think indeed for low latency applications within the same availability zone, NVMe is the way to go, and that it has taken a lot of market share there already. It has also taken a lot of market share in consumer, but I'm fairly certain that a lot of the public clouds, for a lot of the use cases, you don't need sub-millisecond latency, and hard disk is still 5 times cheaper per terabyte than NVMe, and it makes a ton of sense to keep on using hard disk for those use cases and to use NVMe for the other ones. So I think those indeed, hard disk is not dead, tape is not dead. I think those are I think my two big predictions. And then I think around AI, it's too soon to tell. I'm not going to pretend that I know. Definitely, you can see that the data volumes are huge, and so I think that's very clear. That with early days, even for the cloud hyperscalers. If you think about Amazon, it's 19 years old, Amazon S3. It's still growing over 100% year over year. If I think about my wife, she's a certified accountant in a medium-sized firm. There's a couple of dozen employees. A couple of years ago, they were not using the cloud at all. The software that they were using didn't have cloud options. I mean, accounting software, it's like this big server where if they need to upgrade it, the 35 employees need to log out, and then the external IT company restarts the server, and then you can log in again. I mean, you would be surprised how much of the world is still like that. And in accounting, it's now changed in the last couple of years, but there's a ton of industries which are still like that, and all of these industries are moving into the cloud, and object storage and S3 is the prime storage API to accept all that data, and that's why companies like Amazon S3 as a project is still more than 100% year-over-year growth after 19 years. So the pie is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and with Impossible Cloud, we think that the world is going to be more and more decentralized, and that by leveraging communities of smart people and of data centers, we can build a hyperscaler system together, which we do together and which we don't fully verticalize.
Great. And we also, as a store, we we see the huge impact to cooperating with you, because we still would like to keep on data centers and in a private. We don't want to have, let's say, like everybody else right now, forcing the companies going into the backup as a service offering or a typical SaaS is great, but not for every customers. So here we believe that keeping the hybrid model is the best way. So always the first copy for the mid-sized company is supposed to be on site, but the DR perspective for secondary copy always in object storage. This is our, let's say, favorite setup. But for the smaller companies, there is no sense to even keep it up. So it's everything's supposed to be SaaS. So it's also involving the backup industry in changing, plus all of the security aspects that you could take as a vendor with us, like previously said, encryption, object locking, which makes customers, partners life easier in case of any malware or the not only data loss but data encryption and the security breaches. So keep it up, and looking forward for the great, let's say, next year of the cooperating each other. We launched our cooperation few months ago, so looking forward to to see how this market will evolving, and let's grab some pieces from for each other, because we both company has its own bold vision, and we need to also build a more education and keeping remember, um, especially when you are a European country, that there are great players on site, that they are cooperating, and I like this decentralized vision of the impossible cloud, because it makes the data centers working together to believe that together in a community you can build something ahead of the competition. This is how we also work with the technology alliances such as Impossible Cloud here. So Thomas, appreciate your time. Thank you. So we are getting to the close for today's session. Uh, Thomas Demoor, the CTO of the Impossible Cloud. So let's keep it up. If you have any question to Thomas, feel free to catch him through the LinkedIn, or just leave a comment if you're watching right now on the YouTube as a post. Post Backupmonster show, you can leave the comment. We'll come back to you in the ASAP mode. Thomas, anything else from your side before we'll close the session?
Well, thanks a lot for the great questions. It was a pleasure to speak to you. And I think reinforcing that last statement, you said about the hybrid model, that's also collaboration for us. It's for some data, and indeed it depends on the company size, on which type of workload it is. Sometimes they have a copy on site, they have a copy in their own data center, and maybe we're the third copy. And for other companies, we're the first copy. And so having an ecosystem play out there and allowing different configurations and allowing pluggability, that every customer can choose from the menu what they want, rather than we have this, we are the big centralized cloud player, this is the menu card, and you have to do everything with us. And so definitely I see a lot of value there, where we can offer Storeware customers what they need, and your different customers have different needs, and you'll serve some of them and we'll serve some of them, and some third parties will serve another part of it, and together we will all get better and grow the value for the users.
Beauty. So thanks again for all of the audience. Have a great day, and see you on the next Backupmonster show. Stay safe.
Thanks a lot. Bye.